seen a blind man cross the road, trying to make the other side, baby. Ever seen a young girl growing old, trying to make herself a bride? So what becomes of you, my love?
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Pray that he's still out there, somewhere.
Hello and welcome. Pleasure to be with you as usual and to be with the team who are already in the studio. And as you join in here, I can see Sue Squibb from Wales coming in and Sandy Blair. Wonderful to have you join us, and the others that are in here. I can see on the numbers are joining in. Donna, welcome. It's lovely to see you here. You know, you're so important to us. We say this week in and week out. Everything that we do is with you in mind. Here we pray, we study, we hear what you're saying, and then we come together here and all the other weekly programs that we do together. And it's a pleasure to work with such a team and have such a fellowship. The wonderful Rainey Crusett here, who's part of the prayer team for Reading Wahani now, Rick Johnson, Donna, wonderful to have you with us here. I would ask that you please pray for Joy Rittman. All of you know her, and normally she would be joining live with us here. She is in extreme, excruciating pain post-operation. It was a very severe operation that she had. She is partially paralyzed at times anyway, and this one was to release some of the nerves, but the pain is absolutely crippling and it's very difficult for her. So she wants you to know how much she misses you, but also how much she appreciates your prayer. And she was such a support to me, is a support to this ministry, that it's only fair that we just raise her up now. But that doesn't lessen anybody else in your health situations and your own circumstances that you have. We're constantly praying for you in the prayer team group that we have here. So please understand that. So wonderful, Angela, great to see you here. The wonderful Pauline, lovely to see you live here with us. Thank you for joining us. You know, so a couple of things that I want to say to you first of all, and then we're going to give the time to the actual discussion. So much going on here. So where do I start? So this Sunday, the 19th May, we have Dr. Stephen Pidgeon taking us through a time of worship, a time of gathering together for Pentecost, for Shavuot, where we are going to be together. Now, you can see on the screen that that is 11 a.m. Alaska time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for us in the UK, it's rather late, but it's what happens with an international ministry. It's 8 p.m., which is right now GMT UK time, so that we can come together. He's already done the preparation and got the PowerPoint together, but it's going to be a really special time of coming together via YouTube. So if you go to the Eating Wahani and Locust YouTube channel, you can get the notifications there if you press all, or just look out for the link and it will come live to you come Sunday. So really looking forward to that one specifically. Really important. We were so exhausted from April, just coming back from Pesach. It was just too much to do it too quickly in person. So this is a great way of delivering that to you. And I'm really excited about it personally myself. Now, also very exciting news and development. You're already actually aware of this. So let me just change. As you can see, it's turned over now to our gathering for September. This is the in-person Sukkot gathering, which we're doing both in the United Kingdom from the 16th to the 25th September. As I said last week, the 17th and the 24th are high holy days, so preferably no traveling, that we're all settled and admitted come the 16th and departing on the 25th. But, you know, you can come and go as you so choose. We're still looking for location, but we're looking for towards Bath or back to Lutterworth. Florida has been exceptional. The intake and the interest for that, basically, once we just confirm where we are, we're already full house with one apartment. So thank you, thank you, thank you. The culture in America and the way that you work and you get together is so wonderful. And so, there's at least 30 in this one apartment where we're all together already. So we're just trying to now do the finer details, specifically where in Orlando. That will be Orlando, Florida. And so that is from the 16th to the 23rd October, with the 17th being a high holy day. So you can see my email addresses there. Please contact on either one of those. I put Jessica at Cepha just because it's an easy one to remember. The other one is a little bit harder to write down. But this is where you get more information. And there will be a dedicated website to this called High Days International. But until then, you will get everything through Eating Wild Honey and Locust, because we don't want to postpone anything. We want to make the plans and continue on that stead with that. So there's far more developments to come with that. But it's been a great start to that. So thank you so much for that. Now, the other thing, as I was just mentioning, back in March for us, when we came together in Cornwall, we, Eating More Honey as a ministry, had put together the field guide. So it was the spiritual warfare guide, prayer guide, and then the notebook, which is a prayer field guide. And we had given those specifically and did them with an urgency, because we were counting up to Shavuot, to Pentecost, which is still now just around the corner. And we wanted to equip those people in person with that. And then we started to distribute that outside. So this was our first run. They were the first ones that we had done. And they've been updated since then, actually. Now we've got different covers, and they're going to be updated again, but they're more personalized. A fellowship member had actually drawn this cover, created this cover, and these books have been updated with more information inside them. But what we're doing, and this is very, very specific, we're able to now release this to the wider fellowship rather than those that just attended. So I've got here a scan disc, and we have prepared a lot of information that we burnt onto this. Now, on this scan disc, we gave those to those in the UK. It's now going to become available to anyone who wants to get these books, these serious or these on its own. Let me tell you what it has. So it's got about 84 audio files on prayer, demonization, casting out in that area. Very, very important for the times that we're in, especially if we're going into this wilderness type of situation and all these elements we have to come against. It's got approximately 41 audio files on empowerment or that type of line. We've got Mike from around the world, Anthony Patch, all of Eating More Honey and Cepha blogs, Eating More Honey PDFs, Lost 10 Tribes books, other books that are in the public domain that you can no longer get, but they're here for you, directories of various content, very, very wide. And of course, Cepha programming. It's got about 27 different programs of Stephen's and 27 programs from Eating More Honey and Locust, including some of Shane's teachings on here too, which you asked for. So there's quite a lot in this little gadget, and that is now available to you. And so we're now continuing to send that as the part of the field guide, with or without it. You can go to the website and there'll be a section there for that. Again, this is so we equip you and we continue to help. And we're going to continue to do this now to supply through book form, through this type of disc form, and other things which will be released as we've prepared them and we come back to you. And we're working as a team with Stephen, with Cepha, with wider ministries to do this, because time is of the essence. It's not about one ministry, one person. It's about what we do together, how we sharpen one another. Now, as I said, I want to just give so much time to this great study that John has put together. He really does put a lot of worry into getting these together and doing it right. We speak constantly over the phone whilst he's working before and after a meeting, and just getting feedback on where he's going, what the people are saying, and then, sitting and putting these things together. So thank you, John, for that and for your feedback to show us what you actually want us to focus on. So this is all I want to say, because today is history, and I don't want us to get bogged down in the history only. It's important that we understand that foundation and these facts, but let's draw the ruach out of it. Let's see the side that inspires us, that forms our convictions, and let's carry that feistiness and that passion in what we're studying and here today. I want to say this to you. There are many words from Yahusha, our Messiah, that are not captured. You know this in all the accounts of the canonical Gospels. It's just not accounted for. In fact, out of Yehukhanon's very own mouth, he said, there are many things which Yahusha did say, which should they be written about, every one of those words, he supposes that the world itself would not be able to contain what was written in it. That's from John 21 itself, where it says that. And that's always stuck with me, especially as I read these extra biblical books that are not included in the canon. I see that clearly all the time. As I said, we've done so many programs. Stephen has done extensively on his blogs, on the Sefer publishing site, plus the dig, plus now Sefer Moments, plus what we've been doing for coming just over 2.5 years here on Eating More Honey, where we have deep dived, where we have delved, and we've gone into these biblical books. We've seen that they've been rewritten, underwritten, withheld from us. And when you look at beautiful contexts of 4th Ezra, the book of Enoch, Jubilees, Jasher, you can see what they expound on, how they enhance our spirituality, how they speak about the times that we are in, how they provide context for the now, and even for bits that are missing. You know, like sometimes you would read in the first books of the word about the grasshoppers and the giants, and it didn't have any sense and any context to it. But then you begin to understand about the Nephilim and actually who Goliath was and so on. All these things that have been constrained and kept for us. And all of a sudden they begin to make sense because we're waking up, and there is this body coming away from Christendom, coming away from things that have been overshadowed and blinded their eyes. And we're seeing things for how they are. And with that, we're walking as this new type of people with this new identity, followers of the way, the Nazarene, the called out ones, you know, the remnant. That's what we're trying to focus on and speak today. Bring that into context, as we did last week, focusing on what these Jewish Christians were and trying to really see where we are, because we're not Jewish, but we get accused of that all the time. And it's such a difficult thing, but there is a Hebrewic understanding. And there is also that element of the Jewish side that comes into it. We shouldn't be embarrassed about that, because, of course, Yahusha comes from Israel and he was Jewish in that sense. So to that extent, we have to embrace it, but we have to know that we know, and we're able to verbalize and authenticate and expunge who we are and see it in the word. And so that's where my heart is with this today. So we're going to be looking through history, through to see the origin of the country of Israel, as I just said, so that we just understand the foundations and we build that foundation from here of our faith. So this series, and this is the part 2, is for the Kodashim. Thank you for all of those who are waking up and joining us. There are so many new people here where you say this is all new to you, the Basora, understanding Torah, understanding that there is salvation only in Yahusha HaMashiach, and how important the precepts of the Torah are. And it's wonderful to see these baby steps and how you're joining into this. And then how the Ruach HaKodesh is just grasping you and it's becoming real and revealing to you. And that's our heart here. I'm going to end with this. I'm recently, in all this study, I've got so many books over there, reading one of them is the book of the Nazarene. And what stood out there is where it recounts where the disciples went to Yahusha. This isn't what you get in your canonical book, so it's outside of that. And they actually say to him, should we retreat to the wilderness and dedicate our lives to you there? And Yahusha's response was more of a rebuke of what use would your teaching be and my teaching be in the wilderness? Are you going to save the rocks? Are you going to evangelize as such, convert the camels? There is no benefit. It has to be practiced. So we have to understand, hence why we're doing what we do in this serious and gritty of it. It goes on to say that wisdom is gleaned and harmony of life only comes when you face your trials, when you face your battles, when you don't hide from conflict. Otherwise, the wicked will swallow up the good. We're exposing darkness. We're speaking the hard things of Yah in these programs, and we're confronting and walking with, if we can't hide from, but without fear. You are that lighthouse, and we have to show how we are that ambassador, how we are that beacon, how we are that expositor. And that's why we bring to you what we do today. And specifically, we're going to be looking at where these Jewish sects come from, all these different beliefs and the many different groups, and compare them and see, so you have an understanding, so we can put it all in context and perspective and take it from there. This is something that is developing as a series and developing with you. So I want to thank you for always joining in with us. And with that, I'm going to bring in a great panel, a team to take this further. So welcome, Dr. Pidgeon and Drew, John Hallam. Great to have you all here. Just getting your sound.
Yep, all good.
Yep.
Hello.
Wonderful. Thank
Hello
you.
down there. Hello.
Yeah, you know, before we start, Stephen, it's such a beautiful response from Florida already to how this is all moving along. And, you know, it's quite exciting with Sunday taking place and the Pentecost service, Shavuot taking place, and then moving over to Sukkot and the planning involved. A great expectation and anticipation, because you haven't been into America yet. So this is the first time, as like with everyone and with Sefer, Eating More Honey and the different ministries and teams, to meet people. That's just going to be wonderful, to meet these faces we see so small on the screen. It's going to be brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really terrific. And I think you're going to find that when you get out of your comfort zone and you come to an entirely new location, like Florida, which Florida will be, Florida is very unique in its own persona. Wouldn't you agree with that, Drew?
Oh, yeah. They bring people like me, so.
The things that I like about Florida are October, November, December, January, and February. And possibly March. No, Florida is really a spectacular place, and it has its own beauty to it. And the only thing I don't like about Florida are the drivers. I like a lot about Florida, but I'm telling you, those people on the freeway are nuts.
Yeah, we have the deadliest stretch of highway in America.
There's no question. I mean, I was traveling on 4 from Daytona Beach to Orlando.
That's
okay,
it.
Which has got to be the looniest freeway in the entire state. The speed limit is marked 75 miles an hour. Okay, so that let's call it 110K, right? It's marked 75. Nobody's doing less than 85. So I'm trying to keep up with traffic. I'm doing 85. And this guy comes up on me, who I'm telling you, he wasn't doing a mile an hour under 100 miles an hour. And on top of everybody's bumpers, inside and outside of traffic, I'm like, you are nuts. You are completely nuts. 100 miles an hour driving like that. You know, you'd go to prison for that up here where I live.
You should
go right
here
to jail.
too.
But not in Florida. That's like that. We call that rush hour in Florida. Anyway, so Jesse, don't be prepared to do any driving in Florida.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would never dare. Even if I could, I would never dare. Not in America. Goodness, no way. Yeah.
But, where the Sukkot is going to be, it's actually quite civilized country, and they do accommodate a lot of traffic in that area, so it's not going to be a problem at all, really.
Okay.
And I think you're going to enjoy it a lot. And of course, you do have to watch out for those alligators. I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah, Akin was just saying that. Yeah, just saw that.
Yeah, you don't get into bodies. Actually, alligators, it depends. During the day, an alligator will generally leave you alone. I guess I'll have to preface with generally.
Yeah.
There are more.
Amos Spaces. Left arm gone, clean up to the elbow.
Yep. But you definitely don't want to be jumping in water at night. You just got to keep your head on a swivel, you know?
Yeah. Well, actually, you know, for Florida, one of the people that are part of the Sefer Fellowship have actually got guests from Kenya. And so they're going to be coming from
Wonderful.
Kenya, 4 people from Kenya. So that's fantastic.
Well, yeah, Paul is coming in. Is Paul coming in?
Paul Barry, possibly. Yeah. This is
that'll
from
be
Kenya.
fantastic.
Yeah, so this is 4 people from Kenya, who's being hosted by someone from Sefer, the Sefer Fellowship. And there's another country. And for UK, we've got people from Germany and Holland coming through. at the moment on a smaller scale because they just respond in the very British way, whereas America just went straight for it. So it's lovely, but really, really good. So, excellent. English sipping their tea very daintily.
Yeah. You're all in.
Yes.
Exactly. But leave it till the last
A lot
moment.
of tea, if you would.
Yeah. Mm. Exactly.
No, I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a lot. It's gonna be excellent. You know, I think I've been a vocal proponent of these in-person feasts, and EWHAL Honey has hosted them in Europe a number of times now, and I'm very excited. I think they're so wonderful. You know, I did Sukkot last year with just my brother Frankie, and even just one other family was such a blessing. So to have whomever is able to join, meet with us for Sukkot specifically is just it really is such a blessing. You know, it's a long feast, and you get tons of time to get to know each other. You have tons of time to discuss different topics and hammer things out around the fire pit and enjoy some great food and great company. I'm over the moon that we'll be doing it here, and excited to see everyone. I know I've gotten a couple messages that even before this was announced that wanting the assembly to meet each other face to face was definitely a goal of a lot of different people's, and so this is going to be excellent. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Now, what about guitars, Drew? Do you have access to some good guitars?
I do actually. They're my kid's mom, so I'll have to bargain with her. I'll have to trade something, but I do have access to guitars.
Oh, if only Dylan would play, that would be great.
We might be able.
I'll ship her down a pair of drumsticks.
We might be able to convince her. There could be something that she would find worthwhile to barter for. So we do have access to some stringed instruments though that they should they'll make their way down to the fire pit for sure.
Well, we're trying to get Dallas down there to help Stephen with the worship, but Dallas has got to get permission because it's his exams and he had too much bereavement leave this year. So hopefully he will be down with us otherwise. So there's two people who can play piano and guitars. We just need the instruments to get there. It'll work out.
That's the easy part. The people to play is the hard part. The instruments, no big deal.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a new technique I'm using on the guitar. It's called use only one finger.
Okay. With the metal slide where it was like bluesgrassy, or
Yeah, you can do the slide. Yeah, sure. The slide you can do with one finger, but it's new voicing in chords by only using one finger.
Okay.
What chord is that? I don't know, but I'm only using one finger. That's the key thing.
Don't you do that with like drop D, and then you can just like go up and down with one finger?
Yeah, something like that. I'll bring my slide though. I promise I'll bring my slide.
Okay. And we need a banjo. It sounds like too. You could probably a banjo, can't you, Dr. Pigeon?
I don't play banjo, but that won't stop me from attempting.
Okay.
Banjo's tuned in fifths. Is it the banjo tuned in fifths?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's tuned like a mandolin. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I can use the Irish tuning on it, where you turn the bottom two at fifth and the top two at a fourth, like a bouzouki. In which case, then I can play that. We'll have a lot of fun with it.
Wonderful.
Telecaster. Someone's asking here. Yeah.
Yeah, and Laura Lee, I do live in Florida. Yep, I'm in Orlando actually. So this will be a hop, skip, and a jump from me.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. Telecaster or Stratocaster? Well, either one of those would be fine, but I think we need acoustic guitars for this situation. And left-handed Martins aren't going to work. I'll have to restring them upside down. But and I'll bring some songbooks with us, so we have plenty to play.
Yeah. Like Drew said, around the fire pit, the pool is going to be beautiful, very, very homely.
Everywhere, yeah.
Be really great.
And October's Florida. Fall in Florida is wonderful. The mosquitoes are gone. The heat is usually subsided, and it's the best time to be there for sure.
Wonderful. Well, let's bring John on. John, you can open up and take us through this presentation.
Thanks, Jesse. Let's launch the slides, I guess. That's super. Okay, so go to the next slide, Jess, then. Great. So this is part one. This is also kind of a foundation part as well. The last one we talked about the Nicene Creed and the Christian Orthodoxy being launched off the back of that. This time we're going to go into a bit of history. Obviously, we all know we're spiritually Yasharel, right? We don't need to. This isn't a quest to target DNA where it is on the planet or who's in the land for that perspective. But we need to come to a better understanding of the peoples behind the faith. And to do that, we need to understand where they come from, what information they've been given, and what they believe in. And so this next section we're doing now is more the history of the peoples, and the next section is going into their beliefs. And we've got some great tools for this now. If you want to go into the next slide, Jess, that'd be great. So as a background, then we've got a number of books here. Obviously, got the glorious Sefer there, resplendent as ever in the top left, used for Maccabees today and various other extra biblical books, which are actually canonized by various parties, but it's in the Sefer, so it's fantastic. We've got Stephen Collins there as the next one, the Lost Tribes of Yasharel. That's only briefly touched on. Josephus, the Antiquities of the Jews, is used today and next week quite heavily. And the bottom left is the main one that we'll be looking at next week specifically, but this week also as a frame. So this is the one we discussed last week slightly. This is the Bishop of Salamis, who in, I think it was about 384, he created this Panarion basically, which is basically means breadbasket. And we've got two copies of the same book here. You might think, oh, that's strange, isn't it? But it isn't when you consider that this book was first translated to English in 1987. Not 1777, but 1987. Right, so it's only been on the market for about 30 years or something. We've got two translations. The first person to translate it in 1987 was Frank Williams. We've also got the Philippa Amidon translation. And there are discrepancies. And the sorts of things you find is when you look at the Essenes of various, Sabbateans and others at the sects, it'll say, some bathe every day and some baptize every day. So the nuances in the terminology and the phraseology between the two versions is quite specific, and we need to use our discernment to understand the correct translation, because we don't have the source. Well, I don't have the source anyway. This book was written 1700 years ago, so that's why I have the two. And then on the right, we've got the Cambridge ancient history there for the Hellenistic times, which we'll touch on today. Okay, so it is what it is. A bit boring that slide, but there we go. All right, so for the glory of Yah, as always, let's move forward. On the right, you can see a map with squares on it, different colours. On the left, you can see text with the different colour bars. So the bars link to the text on the right. So we're going to start with the red bar, which is basically, we're going to talk about the land of Yasharel. We're going to talk about how the different tribes exited and what happened as a refill. So basically, when Yah does something, he does it extremely well. So when we read through this, you'll find that there wasn't a single person, potentially, left after the tribes. Even the vine dressers in Jerusalem were taken away, as you'll find out. So they're backfilled with other peoples, etc.
Are you guys okay?
Okay, so 733 BC, captivity wave 1, a large part of the northern kingdom was removed. Okay, so in 2 Kings 1529, all the land of Naphtali were carried out captive to Ashura, and 1 Chronicles 5:26, the Reubenites and the Gadites and half the tribe of Manasseh. So on the right you can see the 2 red boxes. So they were taken out in 733 by the Assyrians. They came in, raided, and took them away. 13 years later, the small black box in the middle, it says Ephraim in the middle, okay, that was all that was left of the tribes, because the others are gone. So they came, stormed that, and you get in 2 Kings 17:5. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout the land and waited up to Samaria and besieged it for 3 years. And so these 27,290 people held off the Assyrians for 3 years, and then they're taken away. And that's corroborated by the Assyrian tablets. Okay, so that's wave 2. The northern tribes escaped to Carthage, Ireland, Britain, Spain, USA, etc. Okay, via the lines of the Phoenicians by ship. Okay, so you can see the arrows on the right hand side, the escapes off the coastlines there. And also, as it's written, as Gawler writes within the Lost 10 Tribes book, to the Caucasus Mountains. And it says here, Eldad stated that these Israelites who migrated via the overland route did so in considerable force, that many of the people did not go into captivity, but evaded the calamity, going off with their flocks and turning nomads, that the chief of prince of whom they appointed could muster 120,000 horse and 100,000 on foot. Now they have 13 years to do this. So over 13 years, they went up north. And so they left the land. And then finally, captivity wave 3, we have Judah that moves out in 2 waves. Okay. Any questions, anybody? So that's fairly to the point.
Yeah, it's an interesting history, John. That when you look at the far eastern tribes, half of Manasseh and Gad and Reuben, right? And of course, the story is that they were taken east. Now, one of the sons of Reuben, in fact, his firstborn, is Kirman. And Kirman, there is a city in Iran that is named after him, Kirman. And when Josephus looks at him, he doesn't call it the Kirmani, but rather the Germani, as being a direct descendant of Reuben. So we can see that there is a tie between the tribe of Reuben and the people who would call themselves Germanic, Germani.
Wow, that's interesting. From Reuben. So I always thought of the French being from Reuben, but that's interesting, isn't it? The Germans as well.
Yeah, because when you think about Reuben, when you look at his personality in Genesis, you can see it very clearly. He's the one that was not going to let Judah kill Joseph. You can't slay him. Let's just throw him in a pit. And then Reuben intended to go back and rescue him. And so Reuben was carrying the burden of being the firstborn. He was carrying it pretty well. But then he decided he was going to, Dad's old, and so I'm going to take the throne here. So he takes the throne by having a relationship. I think it was Bilhah that he had this relationship with. And when he did, this was a usurping of the throne. See, it's not just he went up to his father's couch, but this was a symbol of I'm taking dad's concubines, right? It was very much a political signal. And so because of that, he lost the birthright. 1 Chronicles 5:1, he lost the birthright. But Reuben has always had a quest for the birthright. I'm the firstborn. I should be the one controlling, right? And you kind of see this really in Europe today, right? That the Germani, hey, we're the ones who are responsible here. We should be controlling the continent. We should be the ones making decisions. We're the ones building all the economy. We're the ones building all the industry. We're the ones, making everything shake here with profit motive. We should be the ones running the thing. And it's the same kind of mindset, this kind of Reuben mindset. Now at the tribe of God, not Gad, like an American would say Gad, or the occasional Britisher is talking about Jacques Chirac as Jack Chirac, right? But it's not Gad, but God. And God, of course, means fortune. And this name God would become later on translated as Got, not God, but Got or Got. And then not Got, and then Got would be spelled G-O-T-T instead of G-O-D. And then eventually Goth, G-O-T-H, which was also pronounced Got, but spelled Goth. And this tribe, Goth, the Gothic tribes, I love how these kids all want to dress Gothic. I want to dress Gothic. Why? You want to be part of the house of God all of a sudden? You're part of that tribe? Well, the Gothic tribe broke into 2 groups, right? The Visigoths, which means Western Goths, and the Ostrogoths, which means Eastern Goths. And the Ostrogoths were located there in Austria, right? Ostrogoths, Austria, right? Ostrogoths. And the Visigoths continued to move west, and they moved west across southern France. They moved through Spain, they moved into Morocco, and eventually reemerged against Rome as, quote unquote, the Vandals, which is a gang I used to be in when I was 13, but I left real quickly because they did too much damage. I never believed in vandalism. I just didn't. It was like, no, I'm not, like my friends used to like to steal cars.
Okay. I'm
thinking, you're going to steal somebody's car here in Alaska? Are you out of your mind? People need that. What are you talking about stealing somebody's car? You're nuts. Anyway. But the thing is, with the Vandals, they did come against Rome, right? So Ostrogoths, Visigoths. But this tribe Manasseh is a different issue altogether. there's a reason why they're out here on this section, right? They put them out at the far east to defend against the oncomers because Manasseh was ferocious. And they would go out and, you know, when Og of Bashan was conquered, that was Manasseh only. Manasseh, put those guys out there. You know, if anybody comes to bother us, they can try to go through Manasseh. So when Manasseh is taken captive, they're taken way captive. And to the point that when they were taken east, they were taken to the east of the Caspian Sea. That's how far east they were taken, to the east of the Caspian Sea. Well, they would eventually settle in that ground, and they were known as the Massagetae, but they would also inhabit the area we now call Afghanistan. And when Alexander the Great came up against them, guess what? He found some guys who knew how to fight, and they ended up killing him. He got killed by that tribe in Afghanistan. And I personally believe that they continued to move east. In fact, I think, it's just my opinion, but I think Genghis Khan came out of the tribe of Manasseh.
That's the old, yeah. So there's such, you know, it's trying to follow the paper trail, isn't it? And it's like a dead case, a cold case, isn't it? Going back over the time now to try and find out. But as you say, it's via names, traditions, customs, clothes, all that sort of stuff, plus the odd bit of archaeology written on stone. You know, I mean, chiseled on stone. That's all we've got to go on, really. So
yeah, that's it. And there's other things you can go by. For instance, you can go by heraldry to a point. For instance, when you see ancient flags, ancient banners, ancient what are they called? Coats of arms, ancient coats of arms. These kinds of things, although most of those only go back 400 or 500, maybe 700 years. But you can see symbolism of ancient flags that go back farther than that. And for instance, when you see the gold rampant lion, you know, the rampant lion, or the red rampant lion, these are two pretty good symbols. Gold rampant lion, a symbol of the house of Peretz of Judah. The red rampant lion, a house of Zarak from Judah, the red rampant lion, also symbolized by the red hand, right? But you're right. Other than that, it is a cold file. And, you know, I mean, like, for instance, well, anyway, I won't bring that up. But I just wanted to point out in Naphtali, we also, Dr. Jeanson, and Naphtali is really taken east. I mean, really taken east. Like, we believe that the Chinese may be children of Naphtali, and also in Southeast Asia, children of Naphtali, even into the Philippines, and possibly the Polynesian people, children of Naphtali. And that reach, when you go through the children of Naphtali, all the way through there, that reaches all the way to Alaska. The Tlingit people are related to the Polynesians in Hawaii, who are related to the Indonesian and Filipino people. They're all kind of a similar DNA, and it all appears to be coming from Naphtali.
Wow.
But when we talk about Dan, and you have Dan down here, and you show Dan here in this particular slide here, John,
Yep.
you have Dan down here in captivity wave 2, right?
Yep.
But if you look up here, there is, you don't have it very clearly marked up here, but Dan was also up here north. If you see it, look in the region of Naphtali up here in the far northern red block.
Yep.
In the far northern corner there, you see that little city of Dan right there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
See that? That's this.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Top corner. Yeah, right in
that's
the far corner. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is actually right near Mount Sair, or what they call Mount Hermon. And that particular city was formed in the book of Judges in chapter 18, I believe, 18 or 19. Dan starts talking about these groups of the sons of Belial.
Yep.
They came into Benjamin. And when they came into Benjamin, which of course is down here around Jerusalem, they came into Benjamin and they were making trouble.
That's right.
And that whole story about the Levite priest and his wife and all that stuff. And at any rate, they seized for themselves a city. And the city they seized was up here. It was part of Naphtali, but it was so far removed from everybody else that, Japan is Gad, Okay, yeah, thank you, Sherry. When you get so far up north here that nobody was supervising that town where Dan was. So it was part of Naphtali, and okay, you're part of that tribe, but who can see? Nobody can see. You're in this valley, you're all here by yourself, so they seized the city. Now, it also says that Dan leapt over Bashan, the land of Bashan, leapt over. And so you can see that this land, when Dan departs from this northern section, so Dan is in two sections, down on the coast, where they didn't spend much time because they were seafarers. And then then the northern section of Dan, where they had leapt over the Anatolian Peninsula into the Black Sea, naming the rivers after themselves. The Don River, the Don Neper, the Don Nestor, the Danube. All the four main rivers coming into the Black Sea are named after this eastern section of Don. The western section of Don are seafarers. They become the Tua the Danan in Ireland. They create a place at Don's Mark, we call it Denmark now. It was called Don's Mark. They inhabited the far end of Scotland. But they also inhabited Nigeria. They also sailed into the Pacific. They sailed all over the world.
Yeah,
they were the ones.
Yeah,
the Danites were the ones that invented the curved hull of the ship. So the ship would come around into the water like this, and by doing this, when the waves washed ashore, it wouldn't wash over the gunwale into the ship. They were the ones that invented that.
Yeah, that retelling of Dan and Kings is interesting. Don't they get wiped out? Isn't it Dan that gets wiped out, and then they leave like 100 alive, and they take wives?
No, it's Benjamin.
Benjamin gets wiped out. Yeah, everybody. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's a horrible story.
Yeah, it's a terrible story.
Yeah.
We also, and the other clue we have really to these tribes' movement throughout the years is, I guess, Jacob's blessing. You can kind of look at how he blessed the tribes and try to understand that in the context of the historical movement of people.
For sure. You look at those blessings in Exodus there and everything else over the tribes. You're right. You can follow the blessings of the people for sure. And I think that's where, we can, of the faith, if you take the scripture literally, we can, you can follow it through, can't you? Which is wonderful, really. Super. Jess, do you want to go to the next slide? I mean, it's a good template. That gives you a good view of the tribes. We're going to drill into, because I kind of, again, you've always got to read the small print with scripture. And so you think, oh, well, they're taken off to captivity, to Babylon, etc., the wave, but there's several waves. And then you find out that the people left weren't left, kind of thing. So let's go through it here into the details. So 597 BC. This is Nebuchadnezzar when he came in, and he carried away all Jerusalem and all the princes and all the mighty men of valor, even 10,000 captives and all craftsmen and smiths. None remained save the poorest sort of people of the land. So he took anybody skilled and took him back to Babylon, right? Now you've got to think at that time, Jerusalem may have had a few tens of thousands of people, but Babylon had a massive over 250,000 people. It's like going to a major metropolis, right? Babylon was the center of the Babylonian Empire. It had so much going on there. Anybody with any skills, like these people here that take it away, education, no wonder a lot of them didn't come back, right? It's kind of interesting, that I think. Then 586 BC, right? So second wave, migration out and slaughter. So 2 Kings 25:11. Now the rest of the people that were left in the city and the fugitives that fell to the king of Babylon with the remnants of the multitude did Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, carry away. But the captain of the guard left of the poor of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen. So basically, the only people left after all of this tragedy, even the second time, with a massive, this 2 Kings 25:11, I didn't go through all the other bits where they go through the city and just slaughter everybody, even the temple and everything else, right? It's carnage, right? 586. But they left a few poor people to be vine dressers and husbandmen. But then if you go down to 2 Kings 25:22, you can see that as for the people that remained in the land of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had left, even over them he made Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shepham, ruler. Okay, so Gedaliah was made ruler over them. And then it says, and Gedaliah swore to them and said to their men, and said unto them, fear not the servants to be servants of the Chaldees, to run the land and serve the king of Babylon, and all shall be well with you. So he is saying, stay with me, you'll be fine, I'll look after you. Okay. But it came to pass in the 7th month that Ishmael, the son of Nethathiah, the son of Elishma, the seed of royal, came, and 10 men with him, and smote Gedaliah, and he died, and the Jews and the Chaldees that were with him at Mizpah. So what happened there? Next bit, and all the people, both small and great, and the captains of the armies, arose and came to Egypt, for they were afraid of the Chaldees. So anybody that's left in the land ran for their lives to Egypt after the killing of the captain of the guard, basically, even the soldiers. So the land was cleared by one way or the other. There wasn't anybody left in Jerusalem at that point. Okay. Don't know if you agree with that, but that's what it says. It says all the people. So at this point, you've got a land north to south that's been cleared. There's been a land clearance. People have all gone. So somehow we're going to arrive to have lots of people in here. And what you'll find out over the next pages is that there's a recolonization, and people are converted to the faith of Judaism, effectively. Or I hate saying that term because it doesn't really reflect Yasharel. There used to be sects of Yasharel and the Torah, not Judaism, because as you'll see, most people aren't Judah in this country. So if we go to the next slide, we'll look at the reoccupation. So immigration 1, Samaria. This happened between 721 and 681 BC. And in 2 Kings 17:24, it says, and the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cucuth and from Ava and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Yasharel. And they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. So on the map here, you can see the 5 cities. You've got Hama right in the north, where the Hittites would have been. And around Baghdad, you've got the other 4 cities. So all these cities, and this is the policy of the Assyrians, when they conquered, they'd replace populations. So over that period, all these people went into that land. Okay. So, yep. So, okay, as they arrived, 2 Kings 17:25, and so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there that they feared not Yahweh. Therefore Yahweh sent lions among them, which slew some of them. Wherefore they spoke to the king of Ashur, saying, the nations which you have removed and placed in the cities of Shomron know not the manner of the Elohai of the land. Therefore he has sent lions among them, and behold, they slay them, because they know not the manner of the Elohai of the land. Then the king of Ashur commanded, saying, carry thither one of the priests whom you brought from hence, and let them go to dwell there, and let them teach them the manner of the Elohai of the land. Then one of the priests whom they had carried away from Shomron came and dwelt in Bethel, and taught them how they should fear Yahweh. Yahweh. So the note at the bottom here is, the history is confirmed in the Bishop of Salami's Panarian, but he states only that the first 5 books containing the law that the Torah were given. So he's saying that he's corroborating the story, but he's saying that you've got to imagine also, the first of the prophets was Amos, and here's about 765, and then you got people like Isaiah. So a lot of these prophets hadn't even been around. You might have writing of Amos somewhere, but this was very, very early. So to have the Torah and not the full Tanakh with all the prophets is probably not unreasonable, I'd say. As a comment.
Yeah, the Samaritan Pentateuch, it's known as. And the Samaritan Pentateuch is interesting because it has over 2,000 variants compared to the Masoretic Pentateuch.
Wow. Didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's and some of those are not substantial. They're minor differences, but some are major. And one of those has to do with Judah. In Genesis 49, it talks about how Judah will have his hand on the neck of his enemies. But in the Samaritan Pentateuch, it talks about how Judah will have his hand on his own neck, which is indicative of Judah the archer pulling the bow back to his own neck. And so this is one of the fundamental differences in the Samaritan Pentateuch. And of course, both differ wildly from the Septuagint, particularly in the ages of the patriarchs, because Septuagint adds 100 years to every one of the patriarchs prior to the flood. And so you get of something, and you get a completely different calendar coming out of the Septuagint that does not appear in either the Samaritan or the Masoretic text. So what we see in the book of Jasher, in the Sefer, the book of Jasher appears to be a book related to the Samaritan Pentateuch and not the Masoretic Pentateuch. Because remember, it escaped the Masoretes and their pen for 1,500 years. And so it was not found with the Nicaea when they found the text of Jasher before it was originally published, because it was not subjected to a Masoretic construction.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
And then, so this basically implies that we had lost Psalms between this period and when, I guess, Ezra would have rewritten them, if we didn't have them in that Sumerian.
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of, exactly, that's good logic there. And I think this is the thing where, as we find out, the Samaritans never enhance their books. They take the books, the first 5 books, and that's it. That's the end state for them, right? And so when Yahushua comes, they're not looking at the prophets to see. There's nothing to say, oh, look for this prophet coming, that the Messiah is going to arrive, because they haven't got any scripture about the Messiah. They haven't got Isaiah talking about it. I've got anybody else telling them, pre-warning them. So they're blinded.
It adds clarification to his statement that he says salvation is of the Yahudim, which could mean a whole bunch of things, but
it's interesting, right? It's kind of
it could be these books that they didn't have.
For sure. So just want to go to the next slide. So these Sumerians, right? They appear again in Ezra 4, which is kind of interesting. So it's out of context a bit, but it's in context. So I'm going to go through Ezra 4 a little bit here. So it says, when the adversaries here in the Phanarians say it's the Sumerians. So the Sumerians come down. This is, again, about 200 years later. When the Sumerians of Yehuda and Benjamin heard that, when the adversaries of Yehuda and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple of Elohim of Yasharel, they approached Zerubbabel. Now Zerubbabel was the person that brought back came to rebuild the temple from Babylon, right, with the tribes. And the heads of the family said to them, "Let us build with you, for we worship your Elohim as you do, and we've been sacrificing to him ever since the days of King Esarhaddon." Now, Esarhaddon reigned from 681 to 669 BC of Assyria, who brought us here. So these are the boys and girls in Samaria that have been put there by the king of Assyria, effectively, and they're saying, "Can we help build the temple?" But Zerubbabel, Yeshua, and the rest of the heads of the families of Israel said to them, "You shall have no part with us in building a house for our Elohim, but we alone will build unto Elohim of Yasharel, as King Cyrus of Persia has commanded us." So at that point, there's a division, right? And you'll find out that the Samaritans never worship in the Jerusalem temple from that point onwards, right? Ever. And you also see notes below, as you'll find out, the Samaritans who say the Samaritans' Torah is the oldest, is only the first 5 books. And as I mentioned, it predates the prophets, etc., etc. Clearly, this argument with Zerubbabel had an impact, as we're told that a Samaritan temple dedicated to Yahweh was built on Mount Gerizim during the 5th century BCE. Now, I've got 2 references for that. And that temple stood for 200 years, and it's a replica of the Jerusalem temple. And they chose that Mount Gerizim as the mount, because that's the first mount. When Joshua went in to the Holy Land, Mount Gerizim was a mount of blessings, where they had the altar, the first altar to Yahweh built, and they had the mount opposite with Mount Cursing. So they said, "This is Mount Gerizim." It had the first temple to Yahweh and the whole of Yasharel. We're going to build our temple there, and we're going to, ignore Ezra and the boys in Jerusalem, basically.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, that's where you remember the gal at the well, the Samaritan gal at the well she is talking to, and she says, "Our forefathers worshipped on this mountain."
Oh.
And this is at the site of Yaakov's well, which was in Shechem.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, next slide, Jess. Okay, we're heaving through these slides. There's only a couple left now, but it's a good conversation. So, okay. So this is the details of the 2 next waves. So these are the temple builders and the people bringing the law back effectively in 538 and 458 BC from Babylon. Okay, so I don't know if that's the route. I just drew 2 red lines basically from Babylon to Jerusalem, but there we go.
They took the interstate on. They took the interstate highway.
I've got the detail on the next slide, Jess. If you flip to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. So, okay, so 538 BC, the Persian king Cyrus had the great decree. So in 2 Chronicles 36:22, now in the first year of Cyrus king of Persia, that the word of the Lord spoke by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all the kingdom and put it in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus king of Persia, all the kingdoms of earth hath the Lord of heaven given me, and he hath charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? The Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. So he's made a decree then, and this is his decree is in 538 BC, that the tribes can return from Babylon. Now, I'll just say, not all the tribes did return because they kind of like hanging out in Babylon, but quite a few of them did. So in 538, yeah.
This decree of Cyrus is found on a thing called the Cyrus Scroll. And this was, the methodology at this time was a clay cylinder. And it's not a perfectly round cylinder, but it's kind of a conic.
Yes.
It's like a cone. And they had it on display in the UN for a while. And I think it was at the British National Museum too for a while. But basically, I don't know, it's maybe 3 feet wide. And you would take that and you would roll it in ink, and then you'd roll it over a papyrus, and then you have the writing. And writing, you can get the actual text of that scroll. You can get the actual text, and you can see the decree that was written on the Cyrus Scroll that is mentioned here.
I never realized that that when you see all the indentations and everything, I never realized that was like a printing press.
Yeah,
you could add ink to it and put it on.
Yep, that was it. And they'd roll it through goop and then roll it over the papyrus, and out it would come. Right? You remember the old mimeograph machines? I don't know if you had those in school where you went to school, but they used to stink like bad ink, like you wouldn't believe, and the teacher would run them.
Oh, that rolling thing, exactly. Yeah. With the blue papers in between. And
blue
stuff.
ink. It stunk so bad, it was enough to knock it down, right? But that's basically the whole idea. This is what they were using. But like I say, that scroll is it's only got a little bit of damage to it. So the scroll is a very well-known artifact, and you can get the text in the ancient script and its translation. It's downloadable online, and you can see what was actually given by Cyrus.
But the more you look, right, I've got several books here. I've got like the Bible as History is one of them. I've got various other ones, and I've got archaeology of the Bible. I've got loads of books, and the more you look, the more evidence and proof there is. And the Bible's proving the evidence rather than the other way around. It's sort of like, well, go look here, go dig here. There should be a city, like Hittite cities or whatever, and they find them, right? And then they got the languages and so on. So it's amazing. So, okay, so right, just back a slide, I think. Sorry, I haven't finished that slide yet. Thank you so much. So 538 to 516 BC, the temple builders came. There's 49,897 people, and it just talks about the whole assembly together was 42,360, besides their male and female servants, of whom there were 7,000, etc. And it goes on. But basically, they did 2 things. One, the first thing they did was they restored the altar and started sacrificing, Ezra 3:4. And second, they finished the rebuilding of the temple in Ezra 3:4-6 at 516. So it took some time to 20 odd years to get to the temple rebuild, but it was done. And that was the first wave. But when it was built, then they sent over the lawmakers. So in Ezra 7:6 it goes on, and Ezra went up from Babel, and he was already scribe in the Torah of Moshe, which EWHAL of Yasharel had given. And the king granted him all the request according to the hand of EWHAL upon him. And there went up some of the children of Yasharel, and the priests, and the Leviim, and the singers, and the porters, and Nataim, unto Jerusalem the 7th year of Architecture the king. And you, Ezra, after the wisdom of your Elohim that is in your hand, set magistrates and judges. So Dr. P, back to the magistrates and judges thing, right? Set them over the land, which may judge all the people beyond the river, such as know the Torah of your Elohim, and teach ye them that know them not. Okay, so that's an important phase. So that the construction of the temple, starting with the altar of sacrifice, then the finishing, then we have the magistrates going back and Ezra, rewriting the Torah and books effectively, and finally, you got 445 BC. Nehemiah rebuilds the walls of Jerusalem, so then it's complete. But it happens over a whole period of time. Right? It's almost 100 years between the start, the declaration, and the finish.
You know what's interesting that kind of just hit me is John records that the Pharisees' response to Yahushua saying he'll rebuild it in 3 days said it took 40 and 6 years to build the temple. So we're talking about a different temple. Is it incorporating other?
Good question.
They're talking about a different temple.
Right. So the way is
You're talking about Herod's temple.
The third temple.
Yeah, the third temple. And Herod's temple was a different temple compared to this temple. And I'm not sure they ever found this temple because, when you get done reading these passages in Ezra and Nehemiah and so on, you don't find any discussion about this until the Maccabees. And the Maccabees aren't coming on the scene until about, let's call it 170 BC. So you have this period of going on from here. We'd be talking about 445 BC to 170 BC. That's a long period of time. It's almost 3 centuries, right? Now, when you think about that, that takes us back to 1723, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the history from 1723 to where we are today? What's the history of this temple to the point that the Maccabees come in and find it 300 years later? And in the middle of this, also, you had something that took place that was very difficult, which is the Greeks came in. The Greeks came in under Alexander, and when they came in and conquered the whole area, they imposed Hellenic thought.
Mm-hmm.
So, don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. We're going to that now. 2 slides away.
All right.
Sorry. You know too much.
I'm stealing
You know too much. So,
but it's interesting.
Okay.
It gives credence to that phenomena, right? Because we have in Scripture that the temple that they were worshiping in at that time took a different time period than the Tanakh says this second temple construction did.
I think so. I think the temple. Look, Herod. If you ever go to Israel, okay, you can see with your own eyes. Herod was a major contractor, what we call him in the States. He was a contractor, okay? He knew what he was doing in terms of construction. And Israel is primarily limestone. So it's a very fungible tool that you can use. You can build out of limestone. You can cut the blocks you want to cut. They don't break. They're soft enough where they don't break, but they're hard enough where you can chisel out what you want. So the Kotel, or the Wailing Wall, that is built of these huge, massive limestone stones, huge. And what you see above the ground, there's as much below the ground as there is above the ground. Okay?
Massive.
And so when you see that wall, you ask yourself the question, okay, this is an impressive wall. Now go up to Caesarea, where Herod had his summer palace up there. And his summer palace, he didn't reside in Jerusalem. He resided in Caesarea on the coast. And he built a port up there because there is no port in Israel. The beach just goes like this, whoop, continuous line, from Egypt all the way to Haifa. It's just a continuous straight line. So he had to build someplace where Roman ships could port, just like they're doing right now in Gaza, right? The U.S. is building a pier to run out into the water where you can actually port a ship, because otherwise you couldn't get to shore. So Herod built an enclosed square that was the port for Roman ships to come and port at Caesarea. He built a summer palace there. He built one of those, what do they call them, infinity swimming pool. He had an infinity swimming pool. By the way, this stuff is still there, right? It's still there. He had this infinity pool that looked out over the coast. This is where he drowned his own son because his son threatened the throne. He drowned him in that pool. And then, he built an amphitheater. The amphitheater is still used to this very day. It's practically in perfect condition. Still used to this very day. They do concerts in it all the time. And then beyond the amphitheater is the hippodrome where they had chariot races, like out of Ben-Hur, So you had the hippodrome back there. All of this he built. Then he built the Temple Mount. He built what we call the Temple Mount, was really the Fortress Antonia. And he built this to house a Roman garrison. So it had to be a certain number of acres, right? And he built it exactly in that manner. And then when you go down to Hebron, he built the temple that's called Marat Machpelah. And so you see, again, those same huge, giant limestones built up in this temple around what they claim to be Abraham's cave. And then the Muslims come in. And so you can see in Israel, you see three construction levels. You see Herod's construction, giant bricks. Then you see the Byzantine construction, smaller bricks. And then you see the Muslim construction on top, smallest bricks. That's what you see. It's very clear. You can see it with your own eyes. So the temple that was built, that was this magnificent edifice that the disciples were going, whoa, that temple is, look at that. You know, when they came into Jerusalem, whoa, look at that. That is mind-boggling. Whoa, jump back, you know. And Mashiach says, I'll tell you the truth, not one stone will be left standing. That was Herod's temple that Herod constructed.
And the modern record does not purport that, right? They don't. No. That's not what they say at all.
The third temple's still got to be built, right? They've still got all the digging machines, the plans. Everything's going to take 6 months to do. Blah blah blah. On the third temple, which obviously we know by the sound of it has already been done 2,000 years ago. 70 AD.
This would be the fourth temple, or possibly the fifth, but it's not the third.
After the Samaritan one, it'll be the fifth. So. Anyway, sorry, I'll too glib. Okay, Jess, do you want to go to the next slide? So we've had the Assyrians to start off with, we've had the Babylonians, now here come the Greeks. So in 333 BC, Alexander defeated King Darius III at the Battle of Issus. The Greeks take over from Babylonians. So the Greeks, obviously, high culture, etc. But as we've said before in one of our other programs, you know, when you look at the definition of how the Greeks look at, you know, Phoenicia, they take it as being the whole of Canaan, effectively. So it says the Greek name Phoenix or Phoenix is first mentioned by Homer. In Homer, Phoenician is synonymous with Sidonian, though the exact extent of the region called Phoenicia cannot be determined. The name is clearly the Greek equivalent of Canaan. That's important, that, because when you do Googles for Phoenicia, you see the 5 cities or whatever it is on the left, and that's it. Right, it goes in about 2 miles, it's done. Right, it's all sea, nothing else. But these Greeks didn't treat it that way. And as you go down through here, the Cambridge Ancient History, I'll just read this section from it. It says, Phoenicia in the late 4th and early 3rd centuries was Hellenized to a comparatively large extent. At that time, Phoenicians were at home in Greece, Athens, Rhodes, and in Corinth, and the Greeks at home in Phoenicia. As far back as Ptolemaic rule, Judea, that is the city of Jerusalem, its territory and adjacent district inhabited by the Jews was surrounded by a ring of Greek cities. This is the Cambridge verbiage here, okay, from the history department. Some of those were cities containing a fair number of Macedonian and Greek settlers, military and civilian, some of them ancient commercial cities which are developing along the same lines of gradual Hellenization as the neighbouring cities of Phoenicia. The coastal towns of Apollonia, Joppa, Astos, Ascalon, Athendon, Gaza, Raphaea, etc. In Samaria, the city of Samaria itself and Nysa, Sippopolis had undoubtedly a considerable Greek population. At Marissa in Palestine, there certainly existed a colony of Sidonians for the most part of the Greeks, with its own self-government and representatives. Tombs excavated from around 200 BC prove that. Okay, and then Transjordan, Philadelphia, Philitoria, as you know, reflect Ptolemaic Egyptian foundations. However, Pella, Dion, Goza, Garda, Abila form various Seleucid Greek kings. So you can see what really happened was the northern territories of Samaria were filled very early on by the Babylonians. Jerusalem was then filled by people coming back from Babylon, but that was in the thousands. There's about 45,000 people came back right there. And then over the next, from 333 BC onwards, right, until the Herodian era, about 60 BC, right, over that nearly, several hundred-year period, the Greeks moved in, right, and the Egyptians, and built cities all around, as you can see on the map on the right. So, Dr. Fee, that's what you're saying, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, that it was a very Hellenized area, and the Greek construction was also, not only was it Hellenized in terms of language and in terms of politics, but it was also Hellenized in terms of religion. So there were many temples of Jupiter that were established. Now, one of the big questions is on top rock, which Islam says, okay, that belongs to us, built in 688 AD. But there is no other structure, there's no other Islamic structure in the world that is built on an 8-sided foundation, like the Dome of the Rock is. And the reason why it's got an 8-sided foundation is because at one time it was a temple of Jupiter. And that temple of Jupiter goes way back, and how far it goes back, we don't know. I suspect that it doesn't go back farther than Herod, because I think Herod is responsible for that mound. And, after they put up all those rocks to enclose that, then they had to fill it in flat. And once they filled it in flat, then they built this temple. But it is known that this temple of Jupiter sits on top of a very large rock that stands straight up underneath the temple. And when you go underneath it, you can see the evidence of this very large rock that stands up under the temple. But it was initially constructed as a temple of Jupiter. And so there were many, large temples of Jupiter and small temples of Jupiter that were built throughout the land. And, if in fact, even when you look at this, the throne in Pergamum, the Pergamum altar.
Pergamon, yeah, that's the one in Germany.
The one in Germany, that's the seat of Satan, or of Satan's throne, is identified in Revelation 3, talking about this throne of Pergamum. Well, that Pergamum altar was initially a temple to Jupiter. And, it has its own theosophy that's associated with each one of those steps. It's got the sculpture of the Titans at war, the fall of the giants, and they're being defeated in battle, the fall of the Titans. All of that is described in the sculpture at the base of that. And then a theosophy that goes through what we would call demons, the spirituality of each demon leveling up the stairs until you get to this statue of Jupiter. One of those gods was, I got to try to remember her name now. It is the mother of demons. Her son is the Cerberus, the 3-headed hound guarding hell, and her name is she's the goddess of Starbucks. I forget what her name is.
I know. I'm trying to think of the name as well now. Starbucks.
Yeah, it's EU something. I'll have to try to remember her name. But anyway, yeah, she is the goddess of Starbucks, and the mother of demons. Anyway, her step is the last step before you get to Jupiter. And so the Pergamum altar had a statue of Jupiter, and it was Augustus Caesar who removed that statue and then stepped up onto that platform and declared himself God.
Astarte.
No, not Astarte. That isn't it. It's
okay.
I'll think of it.
My Google's not working too well at the moment.
Echidna. That's her name. Echidna. Echidna. Yeah, and that's the goddess of Starbucks. Echidna, and ECHNIDA. Echidna. Yeah. ECHIDNA. Echidna. Yeah. And anyway, but the point is that when you look at this Greek influence, and yeah, there was Egyptian influence. Was there Egyptian influence that rose all the way to Jerusalem? That's a question, because in Revelation, it's called Sodom and Egypt, right? It's called Sodom. And this balance between the king of the north and the king of the south, king of the north, Egypt, right? It's called Sodom. So the king of the north was Antiochus, and the king of the south was Ptolemy. And these two, at one time it was the Hittites and the Pharaohs, but at this point it's Ptolemy and Antiochus. So one of the kings who would originally rise over the Seleucid Empire, and if you look here on this map, John, you can see right over here to Well, it's due east from Stratonus, Tunis, which would be Caesarea. There's a
Yep.
little town
Yeah.
here called Seleucus Abila. Seleucus Abila.
Abila. See that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this empire was known as the Seleucid Empire, and it was controlled by kings who called themselves Antiochus. And so one of the first kings who declared himself God, by the way, was the grandfather of Antiochus Epiphanes, who is the one who would lose the kingdom, essentially, war to the Maccabees. But his grandfather was Antiochus Philadelphus, and Antiochus Philadelphus declared himself God in the temple. And so this is why, and when Antiochus Epiphanes comes in, he says, you have to sacrifice pig meat on this altar because this is Jupiter, and on and on and on and on. And these Antiochus believed they were gods. So the point being is that when we talk about the Greek influence on this area, this Greek influence comes in around 350 BC and is going to be totally dominant in the region. But we cannot leave out one critical element that goes into all of this, which is that Ptolemy, who was also a Greek king over Egypt, Ptolemy came in and said, look, these ancient manuscripts that are showing up around here look really good. We need them translated from the ancient Paleo-Hebrew into Greek. And so enter the 72 who would come in, allegedly 6 from each of the 12 tribes, who would come in and begin to translate these ancient manuscripts into Greek. And by the year, let's call it mid-200s BC, you get the creation of the Septuagint. And in the creation of the Septuagint, now, this whole region now can read the manuscripts. This whole region.
I think this is a critical part, because, I mean, the extent of this Hellenization is massive. And it wasn't just for 10 years, it's for several hundred years. And so I think the overwrite really was not a negative one necessarily, because it was kind of like, obviously Aramaic was still going when Yahushua was going around, but also Greek by the look of it, looking at this, all right? And also a lot of these early texts, not just that one, but various other ones that really come across further on, early on in Greek before they go to Latin. So it's...
Right, exactly. And so because it was in Greek, you see here in this region now, this very region that you have on the map, you have a Greek faction that were partly Samaritan, right? They were partly Samaritan, they were partly Greek, but you can see that the Hellenization, that there were Macedonian and Greek settlers, military and civilian, that were coming down here doing commerce. They were agents of Antiochus, running the cities, running the regions, right? These are the governing authorities of Greek leadership. And in this group comes these Maccabees, who never identify themselves as the house of Yasharel. None of the book of Maccabees say these are direct descendants of Judah, even though we have one guy, Judas Maccabeus, or Yehuda Maccabee, who has the name Yehuda, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's of the tribe of Yehuda. And so where you see is that you have the Maccabees coming in, reading this Greek text and going, hey, this Greek text is talking about chosen people. This Greek text is talking about the children of Elohim. This Greek text is talking about these people are pulled out and are particular and peculiar people that are, the children of the one true Yah. We want to be those people. And so this is when you begin to see that Maccabees say, well, we found a temple, but it looked like it had a statue of Jupiter in it. They had slaughtered pigs on the altar. It was hewn stone, and there was a gymnasium outside. So we cleaned all that stuff out and put in an unhewn stone and put in a 9-candle Hanukkah instead of a 7-candle menorah. And Hillel, the elder, and Shammai begin to craft the oral law. The oral law at this point is a law that is being passed down in a region that's been Hellenized for 200 years.
Right.
And so they start creating this oral law, and the teaching of Hillel the elder and Shammai is the era of the Torah has ended and the era of the Tanakh has begun. And of course, the initial Yerushalmi Talmud is created at this time, the Mishnah, the Gemara, rabbinical opinion, the writing down of the oral law, all of this created around 160, 150 BC. And of course, the leadership in the Maccabees goes from Judas Maccabeus, the warrior who conquered a bunch of these Greek cities, to Shimon Maccabee, who would become king over this selected region, and then to his son, John Hyrcanus, who converted all of the Edomites living in the land at the point of a sword to force circumcision in Judaism.
Yeah. So, Dr. P, you just that's it.
Wait, and so
Sorry,
if you could-
next slide.
But I guess real
sorry.
quick too, with the Septuagint, in your opinion, I suppose, RDP, or maybe was it translated unfaithfully, or over time did it become like these disparities between the Septuagint and the Sumerian Pentateuch and what we have in the Masoretic? Was it?
Well, the problem with the Septuagint is that it was not marshaled with leadership to make sure that it remained uncorrupted.
Mm.
It was not marshaled with that kind of leadership. So it was kind of laying around, if you will. And so the first one to really kind of marshal the leadership of the Septuagint was Origen in his what did he call it? I'm losing these names now. The Hexapolis or so. Anyway, he had a book that he had created that had the scriptures in 6 languages. And one of those was Septuagint. And his work, even though they disregarded Origen later and said, his work is like, we don't like it. But nonetheless, the popes accepted the work of Origen in terms of the Apocrypha. And they said, these books appeared in the Septuagint. They're going to appear in our Old Testament.
That's 300 years later, right? So, with Origin. So, but it's amazing though. It's amazing. And I think this is where, again, we got the idea that, 680 BC, we got the Sumerians are taught and given a Torah of 5 books. We've got Ezra then rewriting the books in about 450 or whatever it was. We then got this Septuagint being written, Ptolemy going around to the tribes, rewriting it about 250 BC or something. Then Origen doing his thing. So you can see there's always been about four rights already. I get to it.
Yeah.
What dating is the Qumran caves? So like the writings of the Essenes at that time.
They're roughly between 300 BC and maybe 80 BC, maybe even earlier than that. You could maybe get up to 40 or 50 BC. But when I looked at the writings from the Dead Seas, you have an the script continues to move towards Babylonian block script, Aramaic block script. So you start out back here with paleo kind of figurines, and then the paleo changes, and the paleo changes again, and the Aramaic block script starts to emerge, and then eventually you get to it's nothing but Aramaic block script. No vowel sounds though. No nikudot.
Interesting. Because it's very because we rely a lot on the Qumran scrolls to add validity to, for instance, like the Book of Isaiah. This is a common one. Like the Book of Isaiah found in the Dead Sea Scrolls is identical to, or more or less to, the Book of Isaiah that we have even in modernity. And so with that area potentially being Hellenized around the same time that we see these scrolls being produced, not that I'm raising doubt per se, but it just makes it creates an interesting sort of historical conundrum.
It's a dynamic, isn't it? And it's something you've got to be careful of. And I think as we go further forward, you'll see more of this, but it is heartening to see that Isaiah hadn't changed. I think one of the Enoch was one of those as well. Jubilees was in there.
Yeah.
So there's a few of those classic, great books, which have transited 2,000 years, and remarkably they haven't been changed.
Yeah.
which is amazing. Just flip to the next page. So at this point we've had the northern kingdoms, the Samaritans effectively be populated from Babylon and converted. Okay, now we've had the southern side, and the rest of it Hellenized, and now we're going to see the conversion. All right, so 166 BC, Matthias campaign. Okay, this is 1 Maccabees 2:42 to 46. Then came down to him a company of Hasidians, who were mighty men of Yasharel, even all such were voluntarily devoted unto the Torah. Also, all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them, and were the stay unto them. So they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger, and wicked men in their wrath. But the rest fled to the heathen for help. Then Mettiyahu and his friends went about and pulled down the altars, And what children whatsoever they found within the coast of Yasharel, uncircumcised, those they circumcised valiantly. So at that point, we can see there's a wave of forced circumcision of children.
I really think that this is, when the epistles of Paul talk about circumcision, I really see it in this context, I guess personally. But you had this precedent of like the first thing you must do before we won't kill you is to circumcise you.
Exactly.
And when he's talking about that, to me, that context is important, right? And regardless of how you feel about the right in the modern era, what he was speaking against wasn't anything to do with really the Torah of Yah. Nothing in the Torah says the very first thing you must do. It does say in the 8th day and that's something, but if you're a new convert, there's nothing. I suppose you can maybe extrapolate out of keeping Passover. An uncircumcised man wasn't to keep Passover and things like that. I suppose there's, you can make some arguments there, but this type of capture forced circumcision kind of became a norm. And you can see the importance placed on it when it comes to them being the Maccabees, accepting anyone else into their fold and into the faith that they were developing.
But you're right, this is an Old Testament Torah state with 0 lines of grey, right? Mm-hmm. You're either full on, full off. You're either with us or against us type mentality in this, right? And that's, this is before Yahushua came to moderate and whatever, so there we go.
And correct, really, like his correction of these doctrines crafted, because it's interesting. You kind of start to see the picture, and history is so important for this reason. But once you get a context of the history around this area leading up into the birth of the Messiah, you really see what he was preaching against. He was potentially even preaching against people who weren't even of the tribe of Judea, right? He potentially was preaching against people who weren't even of the bloodline of the original Israelites. Not that that would have mattered, specifically, but they had adopted practices through this sort of like translated, conquered nature, and that weren't of the original heart of what was written by Moses and what Yah had really intended for everyone. So I think it's important for us to see it in that light, especially when it comes to talking to, when it comes to talking to people who aren't as deep as we are in the way and in the faith. While it might be overwhelming to try to dump all of this on them, if we have the context for why we are where we are today within modernity, and then how that differs from what we understand as the true walk, it allows us to communicate with people better, I think, because it gives us more of a foundation to stand on.
Exactly. And I think that's the whole purpose of this, is not to say, oh, look at those people there that maybe not be true Yasharel, but we're spiritually Yasharel anyway, right? So it's not about that. It's about getting a foundation of understanding to see really what did happen and what was Yahushua fighting against, and why did these people believe in certain ways? Why did these people not have all the books, for instance? Right? Why did Yahushua turn up and no one's expecting him? There's certain things, but hopefully we can go through that a bit with this.
They didn't want him. They didn't want the suffering servant. They wanted the warrior king, right? And so they might not expect him. They also that's not what they wanted.
Yeah, but don't go from this slide yet, because you have something in here that's from Antiquities of the Jews here.
Yes.
And when it reads in here, it says, that besides these Shechem and Gerizim and the nation of the Kuthians who dwelt at the temple, which resembled the temple which was at Jerusalem, right? Yes. Which Alexander permitted Sanballat, the general of the army, to build for the sake of Manasseh, who was the son-in-law to Jaddua the high priest, as we had formerly related. The temple was now deserted for 200 years after it was built. 200 years after it was built. And Hyrcanus also took Dora and Marissa, cities of Idumea. Now, this is very interesting, because if you go back to your slide before, you'll see Dora is not down in southern Jordan, where we're told Idumea is today. But look, where's Dora? See it right there? It's on the coast.
Yeah, it's on the coast.
So Dora is just south of what is, you see Ptolemais, which is called Akko there, just north of that. So Tyre, what they're calling Tyre, is just over what that is now the modern Lebanon border. Akko is there's a harbor in Israel that kind of comes. It's the only natural harbor in Israel. It kind of comes out like this, and then it ducks back into a bay. On this side is Haifa, and they try to tell you this is Mount Carmel, Haifa, and then on the other side is Akko, and Akko is where the Knights Templar had their castle. Was in Akko.
Yeah.
But you can see Dora is to the south of that and north of Caesarea. So Idumea is not down here in Petra, where people try to tell you today. Josephus is telling you Idumea is up here on the northern side, north of Jerusalem, along Shechem and Gerizim, and etc. All of this. Okay, so if that's the case, I've made the argument that Mount Seir, which is where Esau goes, he goes to Mount Seir, that's really Mount Hermon. Mount Seir is what we call Mount Hermon, because the country that is named Syria is named after that mountain, Mount Seiria. Mount Seir, Mount Seiria. Syria, the land of Mount Seir. And Mount Seir was the land of the satyr, the half-man, half-goat, known as Pan, also known as the Baphomet, which, by the way, is whom the Knights Templar worshipped, was the Baphomet.
Yes. Yeah, they worshipped him.
So Josephus is calling this land Idumea. Not Iudea, but Idumea. Important point.
Important point. And it's interesting that that's another dig, right? Let's go to that. Let's just finish off this bit. Straight after that, it says, and they're permitted to stay in the country if they circumcise their genitals and make use of the laws of the Jews, and they are so desirous of living in the country of their forefathers that they submitted to the use of circumcision and the rest of the Jewish ways of living, at which time therefore this befell them, and they are hereafter no other than Jews. So basically, this conquest basically turned everybody to be, you either became a Jew or you're leaving. Mm-hmm. Right, so this was the final, well, not quite the final bolts, but almost the final bolts in that. And then if you go to the next slide quickly, there's a lot about the Essenes, right? But there's a subgroup of the Essenes here, and Hippolytus, again, it's one of his refutation things, right? So he's Christian Orthodox, and he's saying, right, okay, like pre-Catholic, if you like, and saying he wrote a book of refutation of all heresies. About the Bishop of Salamis, and he says in this anyway about the Essenes, the adherents of another party, if they happen to hear anyone maintaining a discussion concerning God and his laws, supposing such to be an uncircumcised person, they'll closely watch him. When they meet in person, this description in any place alone, they'll threaten to slay him if he refuses to undergo the rite of circumcision. Now, if the latter does not wish to comply with this request, an Essene spares not but even slaughters. And it is from this occurrence that they have received their appellation, being denominated by some as zealots, but by others Sicarii. So the zealot is, according to Hippolytus, the extreme right-wing group of the Essenes that carry a little knife under their, like the Arabs carry a knife under their stuff.
Right? Remember that one of the disciples was Shimon the Zealot.
Yep.
Right? Shimon the Zealot. And arguably, Judas Iscariot may have been his son.
Oh.
Because there is a reference in the Gospels talking about Judas, the son of Shimon. Well, was Judas the son of Simon Peter? Or was he the son of Shimon the Zealot?
Interesting, isn't it?
The other verse that this pulls into my mind is when Acts 15, Keith is talking about putting a yoke, because they're discussing they're basically discussing circumcision. They're discussing this ceremony of, first and foremost, you must be circumcised or else you're not one of us, right? We just read that. And when Kiva, it's interesting because this verse is often touted to sort of discredit the Torah, but Kiva talks about a yoke being placed on the disciples that neither us nor our forefathers were able to bear. And I'm thinking now, I'm like, is he going back all the way to Moses, or is he talking about more recent forefathers within the last 300, 400, 500 years that had this yoke placed upon them, this sort of cultivated, conquered doctrine that was being brought in, around 300 BC? To me, that sounds more likely rather than, obviously we know throughout Scripture that Yah's law is freedom, not a yoke. So we understand that in that context. But the forefathers that he's talking about are interesting because it could easily be these forefathers a couple hundred years ago.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, right? You got to imagine, we're trying to paint some color into this so that we can understand what was arising at that time. We see a lot of scriptures and we think, oh well, we measure it to our modern standards, not to this stuff. And then he thought it does be into color a bit, definitely.
Well, because we have 6,000 years of mankind in our hands reading Scripture, right? And so, with it's easy for us to go back as far as we need to in the context of certain verses in order for them to make sense for a doctrine that we're trying to that someone else is distilling to us or that we're trying to understand. But this history is important. I think this history is very important for us as we read the gospel accounts and the epistles, because this was really the world that they were dealing with, right? The world that Moses had inherited and the world that Joshua had inherited was thousands of years removed from the world that these first century disciples inherited. And so when they're speaking about certain subjects, it's probably far more likely that they're talking about this is the context rather than the other 4,000 years of 3,000 years of history that we have before us in modernity reading Scripture.
Excellent.
Interesting. Yeah, it is. No, it is 100%. And we forget how blessed we are with the internet and Dr. P and forums like this and other forums that we can get context and rationalize our own minds. The number of decisions we make every day with everything from going shopping to whatever is thousands compared to in those days, a simpler life, but your voice would be in your local community. So if you had a great teacher, fantastic, but you're getting his views coming through with hopefully the rack teaching for interpretation, but we can't assume everyone could read, right? It's just not a thing. So it's interesting.
Very good.
Okay, if you want to go to the next slide, this final slide really. So that was just again the foundation to go into the next bit, which is basically we have information now on all these. We've got information on 77 groups actually of sects, but there's only a number of those that we class as Jewish at that time. So we're looking at these ones in front of us here, the Samaritans, Essenes, Sabbaeans, etc., etc., 32 scribes, with a view to seeing how they compare and contrast their views on things from everything from circumcision to the Torah, to final judgment, to angels, to whatever, to bathing, and that'll lead us towards what we call on the top here, the top right, it says the Ebionites. Now, that's another topic, and that's one where it'll start getting very interesting with Dr. P in terms of discussing the remnants, really. Who were they after? There's probably at least several forks we've discussed last week, right? We've got the temple. You've got James the Just, got Peter, got Paul, got John. Okay, as the foundations of the local church there. Then you've got the Joseph of Arimathea and the crew that went to the UK. Then you've got the Mary Magdalene stuff going on in France. So we have these pockets then moving out, but we need to start looking at what's their teaching, and what have we, the lens that we have through the Christian Orthodoxy, through the Nicene Creed, is that the right lens? And I think by going back to these, because this document, this Panarion, was written in 325 AD, 384 AD, and that's still close enough to understand more than we do. Right? A lot of these guys are still around, or people who knew them or the text would be around. He was in a prime position as being bishop in the Catholic government, as it were, to have all the information he needs. Right? So we'll be using that.
Yeah, really a good point, John, when you talk about is the Nicene Creed. I was just looking at the Westminster Confession today, which is a very interesting discussion concerning the Nicene Creed. I mean, you have many of those aspects of the Nicene Creed present in the Westminster Confession. And Is that a correct recitation of what the teaching was? That's a real question. And when you look at the Ebionites, there's, I don't know if you recall this, but there was for a long time, there was a floating document out there called the Humane Gospel of the Essenes.
Mm-hmm.
And this gospel essentially denied the virgin birth and also was a pro-vegetarian gospel. It was very, opposed to the idea of eating any meat whatsoever. So it's called the Humane Gospel of the Essenes. But it's a later date, and it may have been an Ebionite doctrine. And you recall Paul talks about this, about the Ebionites being vegetarians and about how they were too weak to eat meat. I don't know. He was not very kind to the vegetarian, to the vegan class. But nonetheless, there is a discussion about that in the text. And when you see all these ideas of, for instance, it was a scribe that Mashiach called into being one of the disciples. He called the scribe in, right? And he called a couple of zealots in, and he called the sons of thunder in, and he called a couple of Herodians in. I mean, Peter was a Herodian. He was married to a Herodian, and so he was calling these people into this discipleship. And so they were not just like, oh, gee, I can only go to, people that are circumcised from the house of Judah to be my disciples. He was calling them in a broad-based spectrum of people. And if you recall, Peter's native tongue was not Aramaic, it was not Greek, it was not Hebrew, it was Galilean. It was Galilean. He spoke Galilean. And so you had, when these people are being called in, it's very, very interesting that how he would combine this group of 12 into a body of disciples. And it also an indication of the entire thinking. And one last thing I want to leave at this point too is that keep in mind this, that irrespective of whether you're talking the second or third temple at the time of Herod, neither temple had the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
Neither temple had the Ark of the Covenant. And so as a consequence, there was no judgment if a non-Levite entered into the Holy of Holies, because he wasn't entering into a place where the Ark of the Covenant was present. He was just going behind a curtain into another place, into a different place. And so this allowed for usurpers to occupy these posts. And so when you see the Pharisees or Sadducees or the Sanhedrin or whoever it is we're talking about, Herod was able to manipulate those people. I mean, look, we even see it in Britain, John. When you talk about the Archbishop of Canterbury, right? Is that a political post or is that a political post? Right? You remember Thomas Becket, who held that post, who was killed by the king.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. In Canterbury, yeah.
Yeah, and so, the Archbishop of Canterbury is very definitely a political post, and as is the Archbishop of Exeter, same thing. Exeter's a political post. Miles Coverdale held that position for a while as a result of him publishing the Bible. And so you can see that it was very possible for Herod to say, I want my guy in as high priest. I want Caiaphas in there as high priest. He's my guy. Edomite. An Edomite forcibly converted, And so you can see that there were many of the house of Idumea that were occupying posts at the time of Mashiach. Now, not only were there, because look, when you look at that passage, I thought about this for a while too. I thought, okay, what's this passage when you see Mashiach arguing with the Pharisees? And he says, and they say, our father was Abraham. And he says, your father is the devil. And they say to him, no, our father was Abraham, and we have never been in bondage to any man.
Mm-hmm.
All right, there's a couple of choices here. Because remember, Abraham had two sons. Well, he had more than that. He had Yitzhak and he had Ishmael. And then he had 6 sons by Keturah. Okay, well, they could be of Ishmael or they could be of the 6 sons of Keturah. But what else could they be? Yitzhak had 2 sons. One was Esau and the other was Yaakov. And Esau did not go into bondage. Yaakov went into bondage. Yasharel went into bondage. Esau did not go into bondage. So they could very well be telling the Mashiach, look, we are children of Abraham through Yitzhak and Esau. We're children of Abraham through Yitzhak and Esau, and we've never been in bondage to any man. Boom. That's what it says in the Gospels. I'm not making that up. That's what it says in the Gospels. So it's very possible that when he was arguing with the Pharisees, he was arguing with the house of Esau.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, as we go on to the next stage, there's other things jump out, and it gets quite interesting. And I think that, having, as Drew said, 6,000 years of information behind it, a lot more than the Bishop of Salamis had, but he was more current. It wasn't a cold case for him, but it's still alive, right? He had still people to talk to. So we need to get a balance with everything, but also look at the politics of it. So the Bishop of Salamis wrote a lot of things, and the one sect that Josephus talks about a lot, and so do the other boys at that time, as the Essenes. Whereas the Bishop of Salamis minoritizes them and puts like one-liner in for them. So I think he's done it on purpose because he doesn't want to talk about them. Because if you look at Qumran, right, there's not a stone left. That's not an accident. There's no village there. There's nothing. Everything's hidden. They want to wipe these. It was so. It's like the A-bombs hit it or something. So there's something going on there. So the Essenes is a big cover-up somewhere with them, I believe.
Well, when you talk about that, there are people who believe that Qumran was actually called Damascus. It was the original Damascus. This is where Paul went to persecute people. He went down to Damascus, we call it Qumran. And the Isaiah prophecy is, Damascus is a ruinous heap. Well, if you go down to Qumran, it was a ruinous heap. I mean, they're now rebuilding it. They're putting all the rocks back up. But it was a ruinous heap. All the rocks were down. And the copper scroll was absolutely instrumental in defining what Qumran was like and telling us the 13 sections of Qumran. And so this is very interesting, fascinating information in the copper scroll. And if you see that the Zealots were part of the Essenes, and Mashiach brought in some of the Zealots into his camp as disciples, Talmudim, well, it gives you an idea that he was probably hanging out in Damascus. He was down there at Qumran. The rumor is that John the Baptist was down there, and when you look at John the Baptist's story, he didn't baptize in the Yarden. He baptized beyond the Yarden. He baptized beyond the Yarden, and so at any rate, this puts him in that neck of the woods. And of course, when you talk about the Hemero Baptist, whether it's a mikvah in one form of the Bishop of Salamis, is it a mikvah or is it a baptism? Which one is it?
Exactly, and that's why I got the two interpretations of the book or translations of the book, because when you read through it, and it's even the seats and tassels, and the fringes, the translations of those become critical to a better understanding. And it doesn't seem like much, but when you go through it, it gets kind of interesting because you realise, what it's all about. These phylactery things. I've seen phylacteries as being like a square cube on the head or something, right? Whereas in here, it's something totally different. So anyway, it'll be interesting. So the next session is to go into those different sects and from as many lenses as possible, basically. But the framework for the Bishop of Salamis is actually quite useful for positive as opposed to persecution. So,
yeah. Outstanding. Thank you, John.
Okay, Jess, I think we're good.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much for that. What I find amazing is Stephen doesn't get to see these notes hardly, or he does, but very quickly because he's so busy. And he just gives meat to everything. Through your really good as well.
Hold it back.
John jumps ahead.
You can look at the messages. Where is this memory coming from? It was so deep. It was so much in there. And you guys, you just brought it together. But honestly, that's one thing that when John and I meet and we speak, it's like, well, Stephen will bring this together. But I'm always amazed how much you can actually draw out from these points. So, as a team, it's just wonderful to see that and to see the responses in the chat and this continuing this series to see it as it evolves and so on. But, it's highly enjoyable. So thank you, John, Steve and Drew and everyone in the chat for your comments too as we go through. And, now we will be seeing you on Thursday for Sefer Moments. And everything at the moment, Stephen, that you're doing has a thread to what's happening here or in other Torah groups that people are joining. And so it's really helping. And then, of course, we'll see you on Sunday, where Stephen is going to be leading us through Shavuot, that Pentecost celebration, and the purpose of it, the meaning of it, and really whatever is laid on your heart, Stephen. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that until we meet on Sunday.
No, not really. Let's meet on Sunday. And remember, break out the 2 loaves of bread. And, from my point of view, look, this is so difficult for me, Jesse, because I'm in the States. And in the States, we have real bread. So you guys live in Europe. You have real bread. We don't have real bread here. We've got bleach that's got flour mixed in with it. Flour and bleach. That's what we try to call that bread. But a couple of bakeries around here that are quite good. And so I'm going to be getting 2 loaves, 2 fine deals of flour with a little bit of frankincense mixed in and a little olive oil. And I'm going to end up with a couple of very good loaves of bread for Shavuot. Remember, it's a 2 loaf wave offering for Shavuot. So get that part right, okay? And get yourself some fine bread, some really good stuff. And
this is a wonderful feast day because historically this was when Yah gave Moses the 2 tablets, and this is also when the Ruach descended upon the early believers after the resurrection. And so this is a special one. It's a short one compared to the unleavened bread feast and Sukkot, but there's a ton, and you're going to go into this on Sunday, I'm sure. So just preempting that a little bit, but there's a ton of spiritual significance to this date. So I'm really looking forward to it.
You're so right, and the thing is, you can't go over the facts enough because there are so many people new. As I've put this program out, people are already saying, do you know what? I only thought it happened at Pentecost. I didn't realize it was all those years beforehand that they were giving praise and acknowledgement because the Torah was written, because the 10 Devarim came about. It wasn't just in honor of Yahusha on that day in the upper room, but that's Christianity. That's where it starts and then continues, So you can really give context and it wouldn't be too much because this is new for so many. Some people have said that they're in Torah for 5 to 8 years and they still don't get these things. They don't understand it. So it's really an opportunity to be as basic from milk, meat going upwards to give context to the whole different community that are joining. Many, as I said, this will be their first time online or in person. So it's a huge thing. So that's a real privilege to be able to facilitate this and for you to be able to just speak it into their lives from their altars in their homes. It's going to be really special.
Yeah, and we should never feel bad about our lack of knowledge in the walk. In Yah's theocracy that he set up, he appointed an entire family's full-time job to do this, right? So they had Levites who did nothing else but serve Yah, serve the temple, and educate the other 11 tribes on these sorts of matters. And so there were thousands of them, right? You retired at 50, I think. You started at 20, and it was their full-time job. So we're playing catch up. We're doing our best we can in diaspora, but you're going to spend a whole lifetime. We're all going to spend our whole lifetimes, trying to understand Yah's words and his, the majesty that comes with his feasts and his timings and that kind of stuff. And so we hopefully we'll play quick catch up when we all get to the kingdom. But until then, we don't have the luxury of hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of Levites dedicated to his service at the moment.
Yeah,
that's a big responsibility. Wow. Yeah.
But it is a thing of beauty, and Shavuot is a very interesting feast in respect of, I think it's a marker. For instance, did you know that the nation of Israel was created on Shavuot, May 14th, 1948? They made the Declaration of Independence on Shavuot. And Shavuot also was immediately following the 6-Day War. Excuse me, it was immediately preceded the 6-Day War.
Right.
And there's a lot of Yah's judgment that happens around Shavuot. And so as everybody's waiting for the fall feast, Mashiach to fulfill, Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur and Tabernacles. But they forget about Shavuot, and they forget about how much Shavuot is tied to, very much is tied to the whole idea of what's happening. I mean, we could go long on Shavuot. I mean, for instance, Daniel 9:24, right? There are 7 prophecies that are contained in Daniel 9:24. 7 prophecies, and each one of those is a prophecy that may have been realized in the 7 weeks leading up in the counting of the Omer, taking us to Shavuot, right? Each one of those 7 prophecies. If you go back and read Daniel 9:24, you'll see what I'm saying. At the end of that is the prophecy and the anointing of the Holy of Holies. That's the 7th prophecy in Daniel 9:24. And so, when you see these kinds of things, we can begin to see the 7-fold doctrine of his whole creation. I mean, like I said, we could go on and on and on and on, because this is the 7-week feast, and it is reflective of the 7-fold, the 7-fold doctrine of all of creation. It also sets, if you will, a microcosm of what is the Jubilee count, right? In understanding the Jubilee count. And I mean, there's a whole, okay, you're getting me started here, Jessica. So listen, make sure that you point me down these rabbit trails when we meet next Sunday, because I've got all the time in the world, and we can go down these trails, and I can show you some things that I think will be absolutely, really kind of mind-boggling when you come to see, the idea of 7 sevens and all that's involved. Yeah, I mean, there is, well, I'm getting excited just thinking about it. I'm getting inspired here thinking about it.
To have the Happy code in this, everything else that you said, so much of this is just mind-blowing. So you have to go through it. That this is the beauty of that goodness. What has been hidden from us is, it never ends, does it, guys? It's just never ending.
No, and it was hidden from us. It was hidden from us in order to control us.
Yeah.
Give them as much as we need to give them, so that we can hook them in hook, line, and sinker, and then, weaponize communion, and weaponize eternal life, and weaponize the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, and then hold these people in control. And for us to say, well, we're breaking out. We're not really breaking out. We're just trying to discover the ancient faith. So I had somebody call me and say, they wrote me and said, well, you're a revisionist. Well, I'm not a revisionist. I'm not a revisionist. I'm a restorationist. And there's a difference between being a revisionist and a restorationist. I'm not trying to revise anything. I'm just trying to restore what was actually there. And to restore it without the manipulation of Constantine's wife and mother, Helen, or without Constantine's, half-baked idea of what the faith was, while he was exalting himself as God, or, what some pope thought who had only half the information, or what Eusebius thought in creating a doctrine that was going to allow Rome to control after the empire fell. All of that happened around the same time, right? And so, when you look at this stuff, all right, so, but I do not care for the term that I'm a revisionist. I'm not revising anything. We're just trying to restore what was there. That's all. It's a difference between a restorationist and a revisionist, okay?
Excellent point. Wow. Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Otherwise, we're going to go into another rabbit hole and more discussions. There's 2 hours in. John, I do want to thank you. This man, he spends his Sabbath, his Shabbat, his rest, his intense study in here, and that really just gives him the rest. He's trying to squeeze it in between the work. Sometimes he's driving and so on, and he's talking out his thoughts and how he's going to structure this and if this is the right way to go and so on. He puts everything into it. And then when it's brought here, just between everyone, it's just wonderful. So thank you so much. I want to bless you and leave you. We will see you, some of you in the academy classes with Stephen. Otherwise, it will be Thursday, Sefer Moments, and then the Sunday. So y'all bless and you take care. You're a special bunch of people to us, and we always remember you ahead and after these programs. So take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Two people laughed. Two people cried. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
blind man cross the road, trying to make the other side. Ever seen a young girl growing old, trying to make herself a bride? So what becomes of you, my love?
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Pray that he's still out there. Somewhere.